We're so excited that you want to be a part of our Spooky Story Slam. So, I want you to take a few minutes, watch this video. I have some ideas because I know some of you may be thinking, I really want to hear some stories, but I don't know that I'm brave enough to tell them. And telling stories is a really vulnerable thing. But I want to share with you maybe some story ideas. So, when you come to the Story Slam, you'll have one maybe in your back pocket. And then I'm going to give you some tips on what makes good stories. It's not something that you're born knowing how to do. And there's some simple tips and tricks that can give you the confidence to share your story with all of us. So take a few minutes and take a listen. I grew up in the Midwest. So I went to birthday parties where we actually walked through cornfields in October and told stories around a campfire with hot dogs and s'mores. So maybe you remember the first time you got scared around a campfire. Or you heard somebody tell a story about seeing a ghost or hearing a voice. Maybe you have a really great idea about, or a great story about the first time you visited a haunted house, or your older brother trying to scare you in your sleep, or a babysitter watching a scary movie and didn't know that you were hiding behind the couch watching. Maybe it was the first time you went trick-or-treating and you were happy and you thought it would be fun and candy, and then you walked into porches filled with skeletons and spider webs. Maybe you just had a really scary experience where you got trapped in an elevator as a little girl and ended up in the basement of a nursing home with old people following you. That actually happened to me. So who knows what your story might be, but just know that we want to hear some of your first time you got scared, first time you went trick-or-treating, first time you went to a haunted house. So these are just some ideas to get you thinking. So when you come to the Story Slam, maybe when I ask the question, do you have a story, you'll have one in your back pocket. Here's what you need to know. There's a couple really simple tips and tricks to telling a good story. Now, Dr. S.J. Murray, who wrote a book called Story Design, says you want to take us through this sort of arc where our brain is releasing these chemicals. I'm not going to make this super scientific or tell you the neurology behind storytelling. I am going to tell you this. One of the best things to remember is your opening and your ending matter. So for your opening, we call it in media res, or just jump right into the middle of the story. It was a dark night. It was a cold night. I just failed my first exam. I just kissed my first girl. Whatever that looks like, jump right into the story. Start us in the middle of the action, and then you can give us context and really sort of explain the story. You also want to make sure in the beginning you're using language that makes you relatable. I always tell my students that experiences are unique. I'll never know what it's like to walk in your shoes, but emotions are universal. And so we can connect with feeling lonely, feeling nervous, feeling anxious, feeling abandoned. So those are emotions that you want to evoke early on, and then you want to sort of take us through. Now, don't wander, don't sidetrack, and most importantly, don't tell us your whole life experience with Halloween or with scary things. Just focus on one incident. And one of my favorite story people, Andrew Stanton, who is the genius behind Stranger Things and Toy Story, he says that good stories are often like a punchline. So there's a build up like you would, like as a comedian would, and then you sort of take us on a twist, or you pull back the curtain and go, oh, it was just this the whole time. So really look for what that sort of is, or where that moment is, kind of build up, take us on a journey, and then feed us that punchline. The last thing I want to share with you as far as tips and tricks is just practice your ending. I always tell students, sometimes it's okay to say, I learned from that experience. Sometimes it's okay to end with, I never went to a haunted house again, or that was the last time I watched a scary movie with my brother. Really think through your last line. If you practice that over and over, you will stick that story landing. So those are just some tips and tricks. I can't wait to hear your stories. I love telling them, but it's so exciting to hear them. It gives us new perspective, it makes us laugh, but most of all, it makes us connect with other humans. And this year, there's nothing we need more.